The box was sitting on my doorstep when I got home from work. It's a perfect heavy cube of ivory-colored cardstock tied with a navy blue silk ribbon. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't a holiday. I knew, with a sudden lurching mix of joy and profound, bottomless dread, exactly what it was. Inside, nestled on a bed of shredded paper that smelled faintly of sandalwood, was a bottle of absurdly expensive whiskey, a single perfect cigar, and a small, thick card. On the front, in an elegant, embossed script, it said, "Your services are required." I smiled. It was our joke, a line from a stupid action movie we'd watched 100 times as teenagers. Liam was a man who appreciated the power of a long-running joke. I opened the card. His familiar, messy scrawl filled the inside. "Chloe," it read. "We've been through everything together since we were 6 years old, broken arms, bad haircuts, Mrs. Davison's honors chemistry class, my tragic college grunge phase. There's no one on this planet who has seen me at my worst and still, for some reason, decided to stick around. I can't imagine doing this without you standing next to me. You're my best friend. Always have been. Will you be my best woman?" Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and immediate. It was the question I had always known was coming, the one we'd joked about for years. He was my person, and I was his. It was a simple, uncomplicated, and platonic truth that had been the bedrock of my entire life. To be asked to stand beside him, to be his witness, his second, on the most important day of his life. It was the greatest honor he could possibly give me. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like a physical illness, that I was going. To have to say no, the reason had a name: Sophie. Sophie was, to the outside world, perfect. She was a beautiful, successful, and impossibly charming woman who had captured the heart of my best friend. She was an art consultant, a job that was as chic as it was vaguely defined. She was fluent in French. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of natural wines. She remembered the names of your pets and the details of your last vacation. She was, by all accounts, a catch. But I saw what no one else did, or what no one else was willing to see. I saw the predator beneath the polish. I had seen the subtle, almost imperceptible way she would isolate Liam at parties, guiding him away from his oldest friends with a proprietary hand on the small of his back. I had heard the sweet, gentle way she would undermine him, cloaking her criticism in the language of love. "Oh, Liam, honey, don't tell that story. You always get the ending wrong." Or, "You're so cute when you try to be handy, but maybe we should just call a professional before you hurt yourself." She was a social vampire, a master of 1,000 tiny, blood-sucking manipulations that left him feeling adored and, somehow, completely and utterly diminished. And she hated me. Her hatred was not loud or overt. It was a quiet, cold, and constant war of attrition, fought with a smile and a perfectly timed passive-aggressive comment. She saw my friendship with Liam not as a testament to his loyalty, but as a threat to her total and complete ownership of him. I was the one loose thread in the perfect tapestry she was weaving around his life, and she had been trying to snip that thread for 2 years. Her greatest attempt had come last year, a moment so toxic, so perfectly engineered that it had almost worked. It was Liam's 30th birthday. We had all gone out. I'd had a little too much to drink, and I had gotten emotional, as I sometimes did. I had pulled Liam aside and told him, my words slurring slightly, how much he meant to me, how he was the one constant in my life, the brother I'd never had. It was a messy, heartfelt, and deeply platonic declaration of love. I had hugged him, cried a little, and then gone home. The next day, Sophie had taken that moment and twisted it into a weapon. She had told Liam, her face a mask of tearful, wounded concern, that I had made a pass at him, that I had confessed my secret, unrequited love for him, and had tried to kiss him. She told him she was so worried for me, that my unhealthy attachment to him was going to prevent me from ever finding happiness of my own. It was a lie of such breathtaking cruelty and genius that I couldn't even be angry at first. I was just impressed. She had taken my purest emotion for him and reframed it as a pathetic, desperate act. It caused the worst fight of our lives. Liam had confronted me, his face a mixture of confusion, pity, and a deep, wounded betrayal. He hadn't known who to believe, his beautiful, loving fiancée or his drunk, emotional best friend. In the end, we had patched things up, but something had broken between us. A fine hairline crack had appeared in the foundation of our 2 decades of trust. He had never explicitly said that he believed her, but he had never explicitly said that he didn't either. And that small, lingering doubt had been her victory. It was a scar I could feel every time we were all in a room together. So now I sat on my floor, the beautiful invitation in my lap, the expensive whiskey mocking me from its box. How could I say yes? How could I stand up at that altar, in a dress she would no doubt have a heavy hand in choosing, and watch my best friend, the man I loved like a brother, marry a woman who was a venomous, gaslighting, and deeply pathological liar? How could I, in good conscience, be a witnesser celebrant to the biggest mistake of his life? But how could I say no? Saying no was not just declining an invitation. It was a definitive statement. It was a friendship pending nuclear option. It would be forcing him to choose once and for all, her or me. And I was terrified that I already knew what his choice would be. For a week, I was paralyzed. I sent him a non-committal text. Liam, oh my God, I'm speechless. Can I call you this weekend to buy myself time? Spent every waking moment replaying our entire friendship in my head, weighing 2 decades of loyalty against the single hypocritical act she was asking me to perform. Just do it, a pragmatic voice in my head argued. Suck it up, it's one day. Smile, wear the damn dress, and be there for your friend. Anything else is a betrayal. You cannot. Another sterner voice answered. Standing up in a wedding is an endorsement. It is a vow of support for the union. To do so would be a lie. It would be a betrayal of yourself and of what your friendship with him is supposed to be about honesty. The thing that finally tipped the scales was, as always, Sophie herself. I needed to see Liam. I needed to talk to him, to look him in the eye and gauge the state of our union before I made my final decision. I asked him to meet me for lunch on Saturday at our favorite old diner in Lincoln Park, a place we'd been going to since we were kids, a place that was ours. I got there first and slid into our usual booth. When Liam arrived 10 minutes later, Sophie was with him. My heart sank. She was clinging to his arm, a bright, possessive smile on her face. Hi, Chloe, she chirped, sliding into the booth next to him, effectively creating a physical barrier between us. Liam said you were meeting him for lunch, and I was just around the corner at my Pilates studio. So I thought, what a fun surprise. It was not a surprise. It was a tactical maneuver. It's an invasion of our sacred territory. The lunch was a nightmare. Liam, to his credit, seemed a little uncomfortable, but he was powerless against her social bulldozer. She dominated the entire conversation. She talked about the wedding planning, about the venue they had chosen, a hideously expensive and pretentious art gallery downtown. She showed me pictures of flower arrangements on her phone. And then she turned the conversation to me. So Liam tells me you're still working at that little marketing firm, she said, her tone a perfect blend of pity and condescension. I am, I said, my voice tight. I just got promoted, actually. Oh, that's so nice for you, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. It must be so stable. I was just telling Liam the other day, I'm so glad he has you. A stable, reliable friend. So important to have those. Stable, reliable. She made me sound like a golden retriever. Comfortable, predictable, and ultimately sexless part of his life. Then, the final twisting of the knife. I'm so glad you're going to be the best woman, she continued, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Her touch was icy. I was a little worried, after that whole silly misunderstanding last year. But it just goes to show how strong your bond is. That you can move past all that drama. It's really mature of you. I stared at her. She was in one breathtakingly passive-aggressive move, rewriting history, praising me for my maturity in getting over a lie that she herself had created. The audacity of it was almost beautiful in its purity. I looked at Liam. He was staring down at his menu, a faint pink flush of embarrassment on his cheeks. He was letting her do this. He was sitting there in our place, and he was letting her poison our history, and he was not saying a single word. Okay. And in that moment, my decision was made. The war in my head was over. This was not a friendship I needed to save. It was a hostage I needed to liberate. And my refusal to be in their wedding was no longer just about my own integrity. It was about firing the first shot in a war to save my best friend from the woman who was slowly, expertly, and lovingly strangling him. I met him 2 days later on a Monday evening at a quiet bar near his office. I insisted that we meet alone. I let him order our drinks. I let him make small talk. And then I laid my cards on the table. Liam, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The box you sent was the greatest honor you could have ever given me. And reading your card, it meant the world to me. I took a deep breath. And it's because I love you, and because I value our friendship more than almost anything in my life, that I have to be honest with you. I can't do it. I can't be your best woman. His face went through a rapid series of expressions. Confusion, then shock, then a deep, wounded hurt. What? He stammered. What are you talking about? Why? This was it, the moment of truth. I chose my words carefully. I would not attack her directly. I would make this about my own principles. Because standing up at that altar is not just about supporting you, I said, looking him directly in the eye. It is about celebrating and endorsing the union, your marriage. And I can't do that, Liam. I can't stand up there and lie. It would be a betrayal of you and a betrayal of the honesty that our entire friendship has been built on. He stared at me, his jaw tight. The hurt was hardening into anger. So that's it? You hate her so much that you're willing to ruin this, to ruin our friendship. This isn't about hate. I lied. It was entirely about hate. This is about my own conscience. I will be at your wedding. I will be in the front row, and I will be cheering for you harder than anyone. But I cannot be a part of the ceremony. Please, Liam, don't ask me to be a hypocrite. He was shaking his head, a look of profound, bitter disappointment on his face. I don't understand, Chloe. I really don't. She is going to be my wife, my family, and you won't even stand next to me. He shoved his chair back, his drink untouched. Do you know what this is? This is an ultimatum. You're making me choose. It's her or you. He stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. I can't believe you're doing this to me, he said, his voice low and full of a pain that cut me to the bone. I really can't. And then he turned and walked out of the bar, leaving me alone with our 2 full glasses and the shattered, beautiful wreckage of our 25-year friendship. I walked out of the bar and into the cool, indifferent Chicago night. The streetlights of the Loop cast long, distorted shadows on the pavement, and the distant rumble of the L train was a lonely, metallic sigh. The anger that had sustained me through the confrontation with Liam had evaporated, leaving behind a profound and absolute devastation. The friendship that had been the central, load-bearing pillar of my entire life was gone. I had known intellectually that this was a possible outcome, but the reality of it, the raw, gaping wound of his final disappointed words, was a pain I was not prepared for. He had chosen her. The battle was over before it had even begun. I had lost. The first week was a blur of grief. I moved through my life like a ghost, an automaton going through the motions of my job, my commute, my sad, solitary dinners. Every corner of the city was haunted by a memory of him. The hot dog stand where we'd celebrated our college acceptances. The stretch of lakefront path where we'd trained for a marathon we never ended up running. The quiet, dusty aisles of the Harold Washington Library where we'd spent countless hours studying. He was woven into the very fabric of my life in this city, and without him, every thread felt frayed and weakened. I was heartbroken. But beneath the grief, a different, harder emotion was beginning to crystallize. It was the cold, hard fury of the righteous. I had not been wrong. My decision had been born of honesty and a deep, protective love for my friend. And he had thrown it back in my face, blinded by a woman who was, I knew with a deep, primal certainty, a predator. My grief slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to curdle into a new kind of resolve. I had lost the battle for my friendship, but the war for my friend, the war was not over yet. If I couldn't save our friendship, then I would. By God, save him! My refusal to be in the wedding was no longer just a principled stand. It was the first move in a new, much more dangerous game. It was no longer a defense of my own integrity. It was the beginning of my revenge. And the target of my revenge was not just Sophie's relationship with Liam. It was Sophie herself. The inciting incident for my investigation, the thread that I would begin to pull until her entire, carefully woven tapestry of lies unraveled, came from Liam himself. In his anger, in his desperate defense of her, he had given me my first clue. She's been through so much. He had yelled at me across the table at the bar, his face flushed with a righteous indignation she had no doubt coached him on. You don't know anything about what happened to her in New York. You have no right to judge her. The words had meant nothing to me at the time, lost in the pain of the moment. But in the quiet, angry aftermath, they echoed in my mind. New York. Sophie's entire persona was that of a sophisticated, worldly art consultant who had traveled extensively, but was, at her core, a Midwestern girl who had come to Chicago for its grounded, authentic art scene. She rarely, if ever, mentioned New York, and she had certainly never mentioned anything remotely tragic happening to her there. Her life story, as she told it, was one of effortless, uninterrupted success. A tragic, mysterious past did not fit the brand, and Sophie was, above all else, a brand. My work, my real work, began. My job at the marketing firm had its perks. I was good at it because I was, by nature, a detective. I knew how to dig. I knew how to find the patterns in the data, to connect the disparate points that told a story. I had spent years building brand narratives for my clients. Now, I would use those same skills to deconstruct one. I started with a deep dive online, far beyond a simple Google search. I used the firm's access to professional databases, tools, that could scrape the deep web and archives that weren't indexed by conventional search engines. I spent my nights not on Netflix, but on LexisNexis, searching public records, property deeds, and old news databases. I searched for her name, Sophie Sterling, and I found almost nothing. It was, in itself, a red flag. A woman of her age, a supposed social butterfly and successful consultant, had an almost non-existent digital footprint before she had arrived in Chicago 3 years ago. There were a few scattered social media posts, a generic LinkedIn profile that listed a degree from a small, unverifiable online university. But before that, it was as if she hadn't existed. So I changed my search parameters. I focused on New York, and I started searching for her name not as a primary search term, but in connection with the art galleries and consulting firms she had claimed to work for. Still nothing. She had never been an employee. She had never been a partner. She was a ghost, which meant that Sophie Sterling was very likely a ghost name. I was at a dead end. I spent a week chasing shadows, feeling the cold tendrils of defeat wrap around me. And then I had a breakthrough. I was scrolling through an old photo album on Liam's Facebook page, a collection of pictures from their first year of dating. I was looking for clues, for faces I didn't recognize, for anything. In a group shot from a Halloween party too. Years ago, I saw her. She was dressed as Audrey Hepburn from Breakfast at Tiffany's. She was standing next to a woman I didn't know. The woman had tagged Sophie in the photo, but she hadn't tagged her as Sophie Sterling. She had tagged her as Sophie D. The comment under the photo read, "Love my Holly Golightly. Miss you so much. Sophie D, NYC isn't the same without you." Sophie D. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I went back to the databases. I searched New York City public records, news articles, social media archives. But this time, I searched for first name Sophie, last initial D. And I cross-referenced it with the art world. And then I found her. It wasn't a big story. It was a small digital-only article from a niche art world blog dated 4 years ago. The headline was dry, almost boring. Chelsea Gallery embezzlement case concludes. Founder's death ruled suicide. I clicked the link, my heart pounding. A slow, heavy rhythm. The article detailed the collapse of a small but prestigious art gallery in Chelsea called the Dubois Gallery. The owner, a well-respected but financially struggling man named Jean-Paul Dubois, had been found dead in his office. His death had been ruled a suicide. An audit of the gallery's finances initiated after his death had uncovered a massive embezzlement scheme. Over $200,000 had been systematically funneled from the gallery's accounts into an offshore shell corporation over the course of a year. The article said that the primary suspect had been a young, trusted junior associate, a woman who had managed the gallery's books and had a close personal relationship with the owner. A woman who had, coincidentally, disappeared immediately after his death. But the case had been closed. With the owner deceased, the authorities had pinned the crime on him, officially ruling it a case of a desperate man robbing his own business before taking his own life. The young associate was named only once in the final paragraph. Her name was Sophie Dubois. She was the owner's daughter. I stared at the screen, at the name, at the story. It was all there. The lies, the manipulation. It's a quiet, ruthless destruction of a trusting man. She hadn't just embezzled from her boss. She had embezzled from her own father. And then she had let him take the fall, let his legacy be the shame of a thief and a suicide. While she had slipped away scot-free to start a new life with a new name in a new city. I found a photo of her, a picture from the gallery's old website, archived on the Wayback Machine. She was younger, her hair a different color, her face less polished. But it was her, the same eyes, the same smile, a smile that I now saw. Not as charming, but as predatory. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening, horrifying finality. She wasn't just a social climber, she was a sociopath. A black widow who had financially and emotionally destroyed her own father, and was now in the process of doing the exact same thing to Liam. Liam, with his trust fund, his good name. His kind, gentle, and fatally trusting heart was not her partner. He was her next mark. The revenge I had been planning, the one that had felt so monumental and all-consuming, suddenly seemed small, petty. This was not about a stolen moment at a birthday party anymore. This was not about my own hurt feelings. This was about saving my best friend from a dangerous professional con artist who had left a trail of wreckage in her wake. This was no longer a matter of revenge. It was a rescue mission. I printed the article. I printed the archived photograph of Sophie Dubois. I sat at my desk, the two pieces of paper lying side by side. This was the weapon. This was the truth, the cold, hard, and undeniable proof of who she really was. But how to use it? My first instinct was to run to Liam, to slap the papers down in front of him and say, "See, I told you so." But I knew, with a sinking certainty, that it wouldn't work. He was too deep in her web. He would see this not as a revelation, but as a desperate, jealous attack. He would see me as the villain, a bitter ex-friend digging up dirt to ruin his happiness. Sophie would cry. She would spin some elaborate tragic story about being framed, about her father's enemies, about a painful past she had tried to escape, and Liam would believe her. He would choose the comfortable lie she was offering over the ugly, inconvenient truth I was trying to force upon him. No, I could not be the one to show him. I had to create a situation where he would be forced to see it for himself. A situation so public, so undeniable, that even he, in his state of willful blindness, could not look away. My eyes drifted to the invitation that was still sitting on my counter. The heavy ivory cardstock from a life I no longer had. Their wedding invitation. It listed the date, the time, and the venue. An art gallery, of course. The wedding itself. The ultimate public performance of their love and commitment. It was the perfect stage. I now had the motive, I had the weapon, and I had the venue. All that was left was to build the bomb. In the cold, quiet days that followed, the severing of my friendship with Liam, my grief became a strange and potent fuel. It burned away my hesitation, my fear, my sentimentality. All that was left was a pure, cold, and diamond-hard sense of purpose. I was no longer a heartbroken friend. I was an investigator. And I had a case to build. My apartment, once a cozy haven filled with memories of late-night talks and movie marathons with Liam, transformed into a war room. The walls of my small home office disappeared under a spiderweb of sticky notes, printouts, and timelines. I was a marketing strategist by trade. I knew how to identify a target demographic, analyze their weaknesses, and craft a narrative. My target was Sophie, and her weakness I knew was the same as her strength, her meticulously constructed and therefore completely fraudulent brand. The thread Liam had given me, what happened to her in New York, was my only lead. I had the article about the Dubois Gallery, the suicide of her father, and the embezzlement scandal. It was a bombshell, but it was not enough. I needed to build a bridge, an undeniable, irrefutable link between the disgraced Sophie Dubois of New York and the celebrated Sophie Sterling of Chicago. If I confronted Liam with just that one article, she would spin it. She would call it a tragic coincidence, a case of mistaken identity, a smear campaign by a jealous friend. I needed more. I needed an airtight prosecutorial case. My first move was ethically questionable. At work, my firm subscribed to a series of powerful data aggregation services. Tools we used to build demographic profiles for marketing campaigns. They were terrifyingly comprehensive, capable of pulling credit reports, property records, and background checks from a handful of data points. Under the guise of researching a new high-net-worth client profile, I ran a check on Sophie Sterling. The results were illuminating. The Sophie Sterling who lived in Chicago was, on paper, a financial mess. She had over $50,000 in credit card debt spread across a half-dozen cards. She had an outstanding loan on her ludicrously expensive sports car. She was a woman living a life funded entirely by debt and, I suspected, by Liam's generosity. There were no assets in her name, no property, no savings. She was a ghost with a Gucci handbag. But the report gave me the one thing I truly needed: a social security number. With that 9-digit key, I could unlock her past. I ran a new search, this time using the number, and there it was. A list of prior addresses, all in New York, and a list of prior names, one of which was Sophie Dubois. The bridge was built. The two women were officially the same person. Now I needed the human element. I needed a witness. I went back to the Halloween photo on Liam's Facebook page, the one where his friend had tagged her as Sophie D. The friend's name was Marissa Klein. Her profile was public. A curated feed of a glamorous party girl life in Manhattan. She was exactly the kind of person Sophie would have surrounded herself with. I couldn't approach her as Chloe, Liam's spurned best friend. I needed a disguise. I spent an afternoon creating a fake Instagram profile. I called her Anna Vance, a freelance art journalist and blogger. I populated the feed with stolen generic photos of art galleries, latte art, and sunsets. I made myself look legitimate, if a little boring. And then I sent Marissa Klein a direct message. "Hi, Marissa," I wrote, my heart pounding. "My name is Anna Vance. I'm a writer with the blog Midwest Muse. I'm doing a feature piece on the rising stars of the Chicago art scene, and I'm profiling the brilliant Sophie Sterling. I saw on an old photo that you two are friends. Be so grateful for the chance to chat with you for a few minutes to get a quote about her time in New York. She's such an inspiration. 'Twas a shot in the dark. It's a piece of social engineering that felt both slimy and thrilling. I was using the language of praise and flattery, Sophie's own native tongue, as a weapon. To my astonishment, she replied within the hour. "Oh my God, hi, a feature on Soph. That's amazing. She's literally the best. I'm a little slammed this week, but could Def chat for a few minutes tomorrow?" The next afternoon, I sat in my quiet Chicago apartment, a headset on, my voice recorder running, and I called her. I pitched my voice a little higher, a little more effervescent. I was Anna Vance, the eager young blogger. "Thank you so much for doing this," I began. "Sophie is just so talented. Chicago is completely obsessed with her." "I'm not surprised," Marissa said, her voice a rapid-fire staccato of classic Manhattan vocal fry. "Soph has always been able to get whatever she wants. It's just a force of nature. It's love to hear a bit about her time in New York," I said, trying to sound casual. "She's so private about her past. She must have taken the art world by storm there, too." There was a pause. For the first time, Marissa's voice lost its bubbly quality. "Her time in New York was complicated," she said, her tone suddenly cautious. "You know, with her dad and everything. This was it. It's the opening." Of course," I said, feigning a solemnity I did not feel. "The tragedy with her father's gallery. It must have been so devastating for her." "Devastating is one word for it," Marissa said, and then a floodgate of 4-year-old gossip seemed to burst open. "I mean, look, I love Soph, but that whole situation was, a mess. Jean-Paul was a sweet man, but he was a terrible businessman. The gallery was drowning in debt, and Sophie. She was living a life the gallery couldn't afford. We all knew it. The clothes, the parties, the trips. We just assumed her dad was spoiling her." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, none of us were surprised when the money went missing. The only person who was surprised was Jean-Paul. I think the shock of it, the betrayal, I think it's what killed him. He worshipped her." I felt a chill go down my spine. "But they never charged her," I said, fishing. "No," Marissa said with a cynical laugh. "Sophie's always been good at making sure someone else takes the fall. She's a survivor. She just disappeared. After the funeral, a few months later, she pops up in Chicago with a new last name and a rich new boyfriend. That's Sophie. She always lands on her feet." We talked for a few more minutes, but I had what I needed. A first-hand witness account that corroborated the entire story. She hadn't just let her father take the fall. She had been the direct cause of his ruin and, in all likelihood, his death. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. So much bigger, so much darker than I had ever imagined. The smiling, charming woman my best friend was about to marry was not just a liar and a manipulator. Oh, she was a monster. My last lingering doubts about the morality of my own plan were incinerated in the fire of this new revelation. This was no longer just about saving Liam from a bad marriage and a little financial ruin. This was about saving him from a black widow who would, without a doubt, destroy his life as casually as she had destroyed her own father's. I had the evidence. I had the witness. Now I needed the weapon. I thought about sending a dramatic, anonymous email to the entire wedding guest list. I thought about hiring a plane to fly a banner over the church. But these were crude, brutish ideas. My revenge had to be elegant, had to be precise. It had to use the very tools of her own fraudulent life against her. The wedding website? I had the link from their invitation. It was as nauseatingly perfect as she was. Slick, professionally designed site with soft focus photos of her and Liam looking adoringly at each other. There was a section for their registry, a section for hotel information, and most importantly, a section titled Our Story. I clicked on it. I began to read the most elaborate and sickening piece of fiction I had ever encountered. It was a completely fabricated tale of how they had met at an art auction, how they had bonded over a shared love of postmodern sculpture, how he had pursued her for months. It was a romance novel, and it was a lie. They had met at a bar, and she had latched onto him the moment she'd heard his last name and realized he was from a wealthy family. As I read this saccharine, insulting fantasy, I knew I had found my delivery system. Hacking into the site was surprisingly easy. Sophie, in her supreme arrogance, had used a password that was a simple combination of her dog's name and Liam's birthday. It took me less than 5 minutes to get into the back end of the site. I had complete control. This was the midpoint. The moment I crossed the line from a passive investigator to an active saboteur, I spent the rest of the night creating a new hidden page on their website. I worked with the focused, obsessive energy of an artist on a deadline. I wrote out a clear, damning timeline of her life, from the embezzlement at the Dubois Gallery to her arrival in Chicago. I uploaded a PDF of the news article. I uploaded the audio file of my conversation with Marissa Klein. I uploaded screenshots of her credit reports showing her mountains of debt. I uploaded the photo of her as Sophie Dubois. I created a complete, irrefutable, and devastating dossier of her entire fraudulent life. At the top of the page, I wrote the title, R. Real Story. I saved the page as a hidden draft. It was there, a digital bomb sitting silently in the heart of their perfect romantic website, waiting for me to press the publish button. A few days later, I ran into them. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at a farmer's market. In Lincoln Park, I saw them from a distance by a stall selling artisanal honey. They looked so normal, so happy. He was laughing at something she'd said, his arm draped protectively around her. The sight of them, so blissfully unaware of the guillotine I was building for them, sent a pang of something cold and strange. Through me, Sophie saw me first. Her smile tightened. She whispered something in Liam's ear. He turned, and his face, which had been so open and happy a moment before, went cold and hard. They walked toward me, their path unavoidable. "Chloe," Liam said, his voice flat. It was the first time we had spoken since the night at the bar. "Liam," I said, my own voice just as quiet. Sophie gave me a smile that was pure, triumphant poison. "It's so good to see you," she said, her voice dripping with a fake syrupy sweetness. "We were so disappointed that you won't be able to be a part of our special day. But we understand. You have to do what's right for you." She squeezed Liam's arm. "We're just so happy. We hope you can find that kind of happiness for yourself someday, too." She was pitying me. She thought she had one. She thought I was a sad, lonely, bitter woman who had been left behind. She had no idea that I held her entire life in the palm of my hand. I just smiled back at her. "I wish you both all the happiness you deserve," I said. And I meant every single word. I walked away, my heart a cold, steady drum. I had the bomb. I had the target. And now I had the delivery plan. I went home and called the one person I knew I could trust. A tech-savvy, deeply cynical friend from my office named Alex. "Alex," I said, "I have a strange and legally ambiguous favor to ask you." The plan was simple. Alex would help me draft a mass text message on the day of the wedding at the precise moment Sophie was scheduled to walk down the aisle. He would send that text to every single person on the wedding guest list. A list I had easily downloaded from the website's backend. The text would read, "Welcome to the wedding of Liam and Sophie. To read their real love story, please visit this link." And with a single click, 300 people sitting in the pews of a beautiful, historic Chicago church would have the truth delivered directly into the palms of their hands. Her humiliation would be absolute. His liberation would be instantaneous. The bomb was built. The timer was set. All I had to do now was wait for the wedding. The final week before the wedding was a study in surrealism. My life was bifurcated, split between a placid, normal surface and the churning volcanic reality that lay just beneath. By day, I was a competent, focused marketing strategist, debating the merits of various shades of beige for a new line of artisanal oat milk. By night, I was a domestic terrorist, the architect of a bomb designed to blow a hole in the heart of the North Shore elite, my finger hovering over the detonator. The digital weapon I had built with Alex was a masterpiece of cold, irrefutable logic. It was a perfect, self-contained narrative of Sophie's crimes, complete with primary source documents and a corroborating witness. It was armed. It was ready. Alex, my cynical and deeply loyal co-conspirator, was on standby. The mess. Text message queued up, the list of 300 guest phone numbers loaded. All he needed was my final go-ahead. I had thought that reaching this stage, that having the weapon ready, would bring me a sense of peace, of righteous, settled anger. Instead, it brought a profound and terrifying silence. The frantic, obsessive energy of the investigation was gone. The creative, furious focus of building the bomb was gone. And in their place was a vast, empty space, a quiet room in my own head, where the only thing left to do was to contemplate the sheer, awesome, and terrible magnitude of what I was about to do. I was about to ruin a wedding. I was about to humiliate my best friend in front of his family, his colleagues, and everyone he had ever known. I was about to take what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life and turn it into his worst. My revenge, which had felt so pure and just in the abstract, was now a concrete flesh-hand-blood event. And I was suddenly, horribly, not sure if I had the stomach for it. The trigger for my final agonizing wave of doubt came on a Tuesday night, 4 days before the wedding. It came in the form of a voicemail from Liam. After weeks of a cold, hostile silence between us, his voice, when I heard it, was a physical shock. He sounded broken. "Chloe?" His voice said, a rough, hesitant whisper from the small speaker of my phone. He sounded like he was in his car, the faint hum of the engine in the background. "Hey, look, I know things are a mess between us right now, a real mess. And I know I said some things I shouldn't have." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "But the wedding is on Saturday, and I'm freaking out, man. And I just keep thinking that you should be here." I look at the seating chart, and there's this big, Chloe-shaped hole in it. His voice cracked. It was a small, almost imperceptible sound, but it shattered my heart into a million pieces. "Please," he whispered, "I'm not asking you to be in the wedding. I get it. I'm not asking you to forgive me or for things to be the way they were. I'm just asking you to come, as a guest. Just be there, please. It would mean the world to me. You're still my best friend, Chloe, even now." The voicemail ended. The silence he left behind was a ringing, aching void. I sank onto my couch, the phone still clutched in my hand. The cold, righteous fury that had been my armor, my fuel. My entire identity for the past month dissolved, leaving me shivering and exposed. I had been so focused on Sophie, the villain, the target, that I had managed to turn Liam into a kind of abstract concept, the hostage, the victim, the person I had to save. But his voice, so full of a raw, genuine, and familiar pain, had made him real again. He was just Liam, my best friend since I was 6 years old. It's the boy who had taught me how to ride a bike. It's the man who had held my hand at my mother's funeral. And he was in pain, and he was asking for me. And I, his best friend, was planning to respond to his heartfelt, desperate plea by taking a metaphorical grenade, pulling the pin, and rolling it down the aisle of the church as he stood at the altar. The voice of mercy, which had been dormant for weeks, rose up in my mind with a vengeance. "Look at what you're doing," it screamed. "Listen to him. He's your friend, your family. And you're about to inflict a wound on him so profound and so public that he may never recover. You are going to destroy him in order to save him. Is that your right?" I imagined the scene at the church. The organ music swelling. The guests, their faces turned toward the front. And then the buzz of 300 phones. The collective gasp. The whispers. I imagined Liam standing at the altar pulling out his own phone. I imagined his face as he read the headline, our real story, the confusion, the dawning horror, the utter, complete, and public mortification. He would be a laughingstock, a fool, the rich, trusting idiot who had almost married a con artist. "This isn't surgery," the voice of mercy whispered. "This is a public execution. And you are the executioner. There has to be another way, a kinder way." I could call it off right now. I could call Alex and tell him to delete the text. I could take the evidence, print it all out, put it in an envelope, and give it to Liam, privately. I could let him deal with it himself, away from the prying, judgmental eyes of the world. Or I could do what he asked. I could do nothing. I could go to the wedding. I could sit in the pew, a silent, heartbroken guest, and I could watch him make the biggest mistake of his life. I could let him walk, eyes wide open, into the fire and just be there to pick up the pieces when he eventually, inevitably, got burned. Wasn't that what a best friend was supposed to do? I was in turmoil. Spent the next 2 days in a state of agonizing indecision. My finger hovered over Alex's contact on my phone a dozen times. My revenge, which had seemed so clear and righteous, now felt like a monstrous, egotistical act. Who was I to play God with Liam's life? I needed a sign. I needed one final, definitive piece of evidence to push me one way or the other. I needed a reason to pull the trigger, or a reason to walk away. In a desperate, last-ditch effort to find any reason to show mercy, I went back to the digital rabbit hole. I told myself that if I couldn't find anything new, anything worse than what I already knew, I would call it off. I focused on the time between her father's death and her arrival in Chicago. It was a gap of about 6 months. Where had she been? What had she been doing? Started searching for her name, Sophie Dubois, on more obscure platforms. Not Facebook or Instagram, but older, defunct social media sites, blog hosting services. And then I found it. It was a blog. A short-lived anonymous blog on a free hosting platform. Active for only a few months during that 6-month gap in her life. The author's name was just The Phoenix. The tagline was, "Rising from the ashes, one sucker at a time." There were only a handful of posts. They were arrogant, cynical, and deeply, deeply cruel. It was a playbook, a diary of a con artist. The author wrote about her methods, her philosophies. She talked about targeting men who were rich, kind, and dumb as a box of hair. She called them her marks, her projects. And then I saw the final post. It was dated just after she had clearly met Liam. "I think I've found him," the post began. "The Chicago Project. He's perfect. Old money, but with a sad puppy dog soul. Thinks he's a maverick, but he's really just a spoiled kid with a massive trust fund and a desperate need for a woman to tell. He's special. He has an annoying, overly attached female best friend I'll have to deal with, but she seems manageable. This one isn't just a stepping stone. It's the one. This is my retirement plan." I felt the blood drain from my face. My retirement plan. It's an annoying, overly attached female best friend I'll have to deal with. It was all there. The cold reptilian calculation. The absolute lack of any human emotion for him. He was not a person to her. He was a project. It's an object. A fat, juicy retirement plan to be drained and then, presumably, discarded. The grief she was performing over her father's suicide was a lie. This was her true voice. This was the real Sophie. The war in my head was over. The voice of mercy had been shot, point blank between the eyes. This was not a misguided woman who had made a series of terrible mistakes. This was a predator, and my best friend was her prey. The public humiliation of the wedding was not the cruelest option. The cruelest option was to do nothing. The cruelest option was to let her win. My plan was not an act of revenge anymore. It was an act of profound and desperate love. It's an act of friendship so pure and so absolute that I was willing to destroy the friendship itself in order to save the man I loved. It was a painful, necessary amputation. And I was the only surgeon qualified to perform it. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before dawn. The house was quiet. Indecision was gone, replaced by a grim funereal calm. I showered. I did my hair. I put on the dress I had bought for the occasion. It was a simple, elegant, and perfectly appropriate black dress, the kind of dress one wears to a funeral. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I did not see an avenging angel. I did not see a bitter, jealous friend. I saw a soldier on the morning of a battle she knew she had to fight, in a battle she knew, in many ways, she could not win. I picked up my phone, I opened my messages, found my conversation with Alex, and I sent him a single 2-word text. Green light. A moment later, he replied, "Copy that. Bomb armed. See you on the other side, soldier." I put my phone in my small clutch, my movements calm and deliberate. The bomb was armed. The countdown had begun. I walked out of my apartment and into the cool, clear, early September morning. I was going to my best friend's wedding. I was going to save his life. The day of the wedding arrived. A perfect, impossibly beautiful early September day in Chicago. The sky was a high, cloudless blue, and a gentle, benevolent breeze was blowing in off the lake. A rare gift from a city that usually specialized in weather of a more brutal nature. It was the kind of day that felt blessed, a day custom-made for promises and new beginnings. A perfect day for a funeral. I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, looking at the stranger who was staring back at me. The black dress was simple, elegant, and severe. My hair was pulled back in a tight, merciless knot. My makeup was a mask of understated neutrality. I looked like a woman in mourning. I looked like a woman who was about to cause a great and terrible sorrow. I thought, exactly right. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It was Alex. "All systems are go, soldier." The text is queued up. The list is loaded. Just give the word. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling slightly. "Wait for the music," I typed back. "The moment the bride starts her walk." Not a second before. "Copy that," he replied. "Godspeed." The ceremony was at St. James Cathedral on the near north side. A magnificent Gothic fortress of a church with soaring vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows that jeweled the afternoon light. It was a place built for solemn, sacred occasions. Sophie had, of course, chosen the grandest possible stage for her final performance. One arrived early. I slipped into a seat in the very last pew, a ghost in the back of the church. My black dress an island of sobriety in a sea of pastel silks and joyful floral prints. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 white roses and the low, happy murmur of the city's elite. I saw faces I recognized from Liam's life, his parents, his aunts and uncles, his colleagues from the architecture firm where he was a rising star. They looked at me, if they saw me at all, with a cool, dismissive pity. I was the strange, bitter friend who had refused to play her part, the madwoman at the feast. They had no idea I was the one who had written the script. The organ music began, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in my bones. The procession started. The groomsmen, Liam's college friends, looking awkward and handsome in their tuxedos. The bridesmaids, Sophie's soullessly perfect friends, gliding down the aisle in hideous seafoam green dresses, their smiles as bright and brittle as spun sugar. And then Liam, he walked to the front of the church and took his place at the altar. He looked impossibly handsome and impossibly sad. His smile was a tight, forced thing, a grimace of a man going to his own execution. His eyes, which were usually so full of a warm, easy laughter, were dark and haunted. He scanned the crowd, his gaze sweeping across the pews, and then he found me. Our eyes met across the vast, crowded expanse of the cathedral. For a single, heart-stopping moment, the rest of the world fell away. He looked at me, and I saw not anger, not betrayal, but a profound, desperate, and pleading sorrow. "Help me," his eyes seemed to say. It was a look that almost broke me. Kay gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Kay, it was not a nod of forgiveness. It was a nod that said, "I'm here. I'm sorry. This is necessary." Then the music changed. The triumphant, deafening blast of Wagner's bridal chorus echoed through the cathedral. The great heavy oak doors at the back of the church swung open, flooding the aisle with a brilliant, blinding rectangle of afternoon light. And there she was, Sophie, vision in white. Her dress was a confection of lace and silk, her veil a cloud of ethereal tulle. She was smiling a radiant, victorious smile. Her hand tucked into the arm of a man I vaguely recognized as her uncle, though I now knew her to be an only child. She was the star of her own perfect, fraudulent fairy tale. She took her first triumphant step down the aisle. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over my text to Alex. It was time. Now I typed. I hit send. The bomb was away. For a second, nothing happened. Sophie continued her regal, confident glide down the aisle, her eyes fixed on the man at the altar, her prize. The guests watched, their faces upturned in beatific smiles. And then it began. It was not a loud sound. It was a soft, insidious, and perfectly unified buzz. The sound of 300 smartphones all receiving a text message at the exact same moment. A flicker of annoyance went through the pews. A few people frowned, pulling their phones from their pockets and purses with a sigh, ready to silence. Then the happy, sacred atmosphere was momentarily punctured. But then they looked at their screens. I watched it happen, a slow, silent, and terrible wave of revelation spreading through the church. I saw the first guest's smile falter, replaced by a look of deep, furrowed confusion. He nudged his wife, showing her his phone. Her own expression shifted, her hand flying to her mouth. They looked up from the screen, not at the beautiful bride, but at each other, their eyes wide. The murmur started at the back where I was sitting, and it moved through the pews like a virus, a low, shocked whisper. The rustle of clothing as people shifted, turning to their neighbors, their phones held out like evidence. "Did you see this? Is this real? Oh my God, look." The air in the cathedral, which had been so full of a joyful, reverent silence, was now thick with a horrified, scandalized buzz. The glow of 300 phone screens illuminated the faces of the guests, their expressions a gallery of shock, disgust, and a kind of grim, morbid fascination. They were no longer guests at a wedding. They were witnesses to a car crash. Sophie was halfway down the aisle now, her perfect smile frozen on her face. She could feel it, the shift in the room, the change in the atmosphere, the looks on people's faces. She faltered for a moment, her step hesitating, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. At the altar, Liam was still staring at her, a look of profound, tragic love on his face, oblivious. But the groomsman standing next to him, a man named Ben, had pulled out his phone. I watched Ben's face go from pale to white to a shade of greenish gray. He grabbed Liam's arm, his eyes wide with panic, and shoved his phone into Liam's. Liam frowned, annoyed at the interruption. He looked down at the screen. I watched my best friend, from 200 feet away, as his entire world shattered. I saw his eyes scan the text. I saw his thumb click the link, I saw his face as the web page I had so carefully, so cruelly designed loaded. The headline in a stark, bold font. Our real story. The picture of a younger, harder-looking Sophie Dubois. The link to the article about the embezzlement, about her father's suicide. The timeline of lies. The screenshots of her debt. The audio file of Marissa Klein's interview. The final damning post from her secret blog calling him her retirement plan. The color drained from his face. His hand, the one holding the phone, began to shake. He looked up from the screen, his eyes no longer full of love, but of a dawning, catastrophic, and soul-crushing horror. He looked at the woman who was still walking toward him, this beautiful, smiling stranger, and he saw her, for the very first time, for what she truly was. The organ music, which had been playing on a loop, sputtered and died as the organist, an elderly woman in the choir loft, peered down at the chaos erupting below. The only sound in the vast historic cathedral was the ugly rising murmur of 300 shocked and whispering voices. Sophie was stranded. She was standing alone in the middle of the aisle, her fairy tale dissolving around her. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of panicked confusion. She saw the look on Liam's face, and she knew. She knew that somehow, impossibly, she had been found out. Liam? She called out, her voice a small, desperate question in the vast, buzzing silence. Liam, what is it? What's wrong? He didn't answer her, just continued to stare at her, his face a ruin. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Then slowly he raised his head. His eyes scanned the crowd frantically at first, and then with a kind of dawning, horrified certainty. He looked past his parents, past her family, past all the shocked faces, until his gaze landed on me, a small, dark figure in the very last pew. Our eyes met, and in his gaze I saw it all, the shock, the horror, the devastation, but beneath it, something else. Something I had not dared to hope for. A flicker of profound, terrible, and unmistakable understanding. You knew his eyes. Said, you knew, and you tried to warn me. And this was the only way. He tore his eyes from mine and looked back at Sophie. His expression now changed. The love was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a cold, empty, and absolute finality. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. No. Then he turned his back on her. He turned his back on his bride, on the altar, on the entire beautiful, fraudulent life she had built for him, and he walked away. The room exploded. Sophie let out a single, piercing shriek of pure animal rage and denial. Her uncle rushed to her side. Her mother was screaming at Liam's mother, who looked as if she were about to faint. Guests were on their feet, some rushing for the exits, others craning their necks, their faces alight with the grim, exhilarating thrill of a scandal more juicy than they could have ever imagined. The wedding was over. My revenge was complete. My friend was, at last, free. I did not wait to see the rest. I did not wait for the fallout. I had done my work. I had been the surgeon. I had performed the brutal, necessary amputation. And now, my job was done. I stood up. No one noticed. Me. All eyes were on the chaos at the front of the church. I slipped out a heavy side door into the quiet, sun-drenched afternoon. I walked down the stone steps of the cathedral and disappeared into the anonymous, indifferent streets of the city. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt only the grim, hollow, and deeply lonely satisfaction of a soldier who has won the war, but has lost everything, including herself, in the process. I walked out of the cool, dark sanctuary of the cathedral and into the blinding, indifferent light of a Chicago afternoon. I did not have a destination. I just walked. My sensible black heels clicked a steady, rhythmic cadence on the pavement, a metronome marking the first few seconds of my new, uncertain life. My phone and my small clutch began to vibrate, a low, frantic hum against my hip. It was the first tremor of the earthquake I had just triggered. I ignored it. I walked 4 hours, a ghost moving through the living city. I walked east, toward the lake where the water was a vast, placid blue, a perfect imitation of peace. I walked north through Lincoln Park, past families pushing strollers and couples laughing on benches. Inhabitants of a world that suddenly felt alien to me. They were all living in the before. I was the sole resident of the after. The adrenaline that had sustained me, the cold, hard certainty of my purpose, began to drain away, leaving a profound and terrifying emptiness in its wake. The fire of my righteous anger was gone, and the ashes were cold. I had done it. Had saved him. And in doing so, I had completely and utterly orphaned myself from the only family I had ever truly known. I did not go home. I couldn't. My apartment was a museum of a friendship that was now, in all likelihood, a smoking ruin. Instead, I checked into a cheap, anonymous hotel near the airport, a place of transient souls and no questions asked. And from that sterile beige room, I watched the world burn. The initial fallout was a digital tsunami of gossip and speculation. The wedding hashtag that Sophie had so meticulously curated, #SterlingTakesAll, was now a dumpster fire of shocked, horrified, and morbidly gleeful commentary. Then came the local gossip columns, their headlines practically screaming with schadenfreude altercation. North Shore Society wedding implodes in bizarre scandal. Read one. I don't. Dream wedding turns to nightmare amidst shocking revelations of bride's secret past, screamed another. Sophie was, overnight, transformed from the city's darling to its most notorious villain. But I was not the hero of the story. I was the mystery. The shadowy, unnamed friend who had orchestrated the whole thing. I was a mythological creature of vengeance, a source of intense and fevered speculation. And then, as the days wore on, the story shifted. The salacious gossip began to fade, replaced by the cold, hard language of financial journalism. The details of the Dubois Gallery embezzlement, which I had laid bare on the wedding website, were picked up by more serious news outlets. Reporters started digging, and they discovered that my little dossier was just the tip of the iceberg. Sophie, it turned out, had left a trail of smaller, less dramatic cons and unpaid debts across 3 states. Her destruction was absolute. I heard through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances that she had fled the city that very night. She had simply vanished. Back into the ether from which she had come, her name now a permanent stain. Her brand destroyed, her carefully constructed life a pile of ash. She was a ghost again, stayed in my hotel room, a self-imposed exile, and I waited. The days bled into one another. I knew the ball was in Liam's court. I had dropped a nuclear bomb on his life. I had no right to ask for anything from him, not even an explanation. Had to give him the space to navigate the radioactive fallout. But the silence from him was a special kind of torture. With every passing day, a cold, hard certainty began to settle in my bones. I had not just destroyed his wedding. I had destroyed our friendship. Surgery had been a success, but the patient had died. The price of saving him had been losing him forever. A week after the wedding, I was packing my small bag, preparing to check out of the hotel and go back to my empty apartment, to my empty life, when there was a knock on the door. My heart stopped. I opened it. It was him. Liam stood in the hallway of the depressing beige hotel, looking like a man who had been dragged through hell and back. He was thinner. There were dark circles under his eyes. He looked older, sadder, but also clearer. The fog of Sophie's influence was gone, and the man standing before me was the one I had known my whole life. We just stood there for a long moment, the silence thick with 1,000 unspoken things. "Can I come in?" he finally asked, his voice rough. I nodded, stepping back to let him pass. He walked into the small, sterile room and sat on the edge of the unmade bed. I sat in the cheap desk chair opposite him. "Her lawyers contacted mine yesterday," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. She wants to negotiate a settlement. She claims she was a victim of my emotional distress. She's trying to get money out of me. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course she is. My father's lawyers, he continued, his eyes fixed on a stain on the carpet. They looked into her, the real her, Sophie Dubois. They found everything you did and more. It was all true, all of it. The embezzlement. Her father, there was a life insurance policy he had, a big one. She was the sole beneficiary. I felt a chill go through me. It was even darker than I had imagined. He finally looked up at me, his eyes full of a pain so deep it was almost black. I was a fool, he whispered. A blind, stupid, arrogant fool. She had me so completely. Couldn't see any of it. Okay, even when you were screaming it at me, I couldn't see it. She was a professional, Liam, I said softly. It's not your fault, isn't it? Kay said, a new, harder emotion entering his voice. Anger. I didn't believe you. My best friend. It's the one person on this planet who has never, ever lied to me. I didn't believe you. I chose her. It's over and over again. I chose her. He stood up and began to pace the small room, his movements agitated. A caged animal. Then you? You did that. He stopped and turned to face me, his face a mask of conflict. Did you have to do it like that, Chloe, in front of everyone? My parents. My grandmother. You humiliated me. You blew up my whole life on a projection. Screen, this was it. The question I had been asking myself every single night for the past week. Yes, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I did, because it was the only way you would have believed me. It was the only way to make sure she could never, ever get her claws back into you. If I had come to you privately, she would have. Leeds, she would have cried. And you would have believed her. You would have chosen the beautiful lie over the ugly truth. I know you would have. So I took that choice away from you. He stared at me, his eyes searching my face. I didn't flinch. I let him see all of it. My pain, my anger, my grief, and the deep, abiding, and ruthless love for him that had been the cause of it all. I destroyed your wedding to save you. From your marriage, I continued, my voice trembling slightly. I destroyed your public image to save you from a private ruin that would have been 1,000 times worse. And I did it knowing it would probably cost me my best friend. I did it because I believed that was a price worth paying to save your life. I stood up, my own confession now complete. I am so sorry for the pain I caused you, Liam, but I am not sorry for what I did. He walked to the window and stared out at the parking lot, his back to me. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. My father, he said, he took me aside after. After everything, he told me, that woman, Chloe, she's not your friend. A friend doesn't do that. And I told him. He was wrong. He turned back to face me, and I saw that his eyes were wet with tears. I told him, no, Dad, that's exactly what a friend does. He took a step toward me. I was so angry at you, he whispered. But the one thing I kept coming back to is only one. The only one who was brave enough to tell me the truth. The only one who was willing to lose everything to protect me. He stopped in front of me, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. I don't know how to be your friend right now, Chloe, he said, his voice breaking. I'm a mess. My life is a ruin. I am so embarrassed and hurt, and I look at you and all I can see is the explosion. He reached out and took my hand. His was warm and familiar. But I also know, he continued, his grip tightening on mine, that I don't know how to not be your friend. It's the only thing I've been sure of my entire life. He gave me a small, broken, but genuine smile. So can we just start there? Yeah, I whispered, the tears finally falling down my own cheeks. Yeah, Liam, we can start there. It's been 6 months. The ruin of Liam's wedding has faded from a screaming headline to a piece of juicy society lore. He is slowly, painstakingly putting his life back together. We are slowly, painstakingly rebuilding ours. Our friendship is not the same. It is not the easy, uncomplicated thing it once was. There is a new gravity between us now, a shared knowledge of the darkness we both waded through. It is quieter. It is more deliberate. And it is, I think, stronger than it has ever been. I am still the woman who blew up his life. He is still the man who broke my heart. But we are also something else. We are survivors. And we are, as we have always been, best friends. I sit here in a coffee shop in our old neighborhood, watching him as he tells me a stupid story about his work, and he is laughing. A real, genuine, uncomplicated laugh. And I realized that my revenge was never really about Sophie. It was not about punishing her. It was about this moment, this sound. The quiet, beautiful, and hard-won sound of my best friend's laughter. I did not just save his life. I had to destroy my friendship to do it. And in the end, it was the only way to save that, too.